Well, I've got some terrible news. It looks like Donald Trump has called off the peace talks with the Taliban. I've been pretty optimistic about the Taliban peace talks so far because, by all accounts, they were going very well, and the negotiations were very cordial, and everyone was pretty much going to come out with what they wanted from. And even Mike Pompeo was making the case that, hey, we've won in Afghanistan, so it's a good time to get out. Even a war hawk like him. So I had thought, hey, this is pretty good. Looks like things are going to be able to wrap up, and we might get out eventually. However, the president has apparently upset that there was some kind of bombing in, I forget which city, it was probably Kabul, that the Taliban has taken credit for, that killed 12 people, including one American. And so the president thinks that it's inappropriate to continue peace negotiations with the Taliban since they've now broken the ceasefire, because of course you can't have peace negotiations when you're still fighting the war. You kind of have to have a ceasefire, and then you're going to say, okay, well, how do we maintain the ceasefire, and how do we build a lasting peace? A ceasefire is the first step towards negotiation. So if they've broken the ceasefire now, especially when things were almost done and that the deal was ready to be finalized, and supposedly, according to Khalilzad, was just awaiting Trump's signature, and then it would be done. Well, then the Taliban look like they can't be trusted, and certainly the U.S. would look like they're in a position of weakness if they still talk to the Taliban directly after this incident occurred. And so while I'm not happy at all that the president, has canceled the peace talks at this point, I do understand why he did it, and he was in a very difficult position. I think that if you're anyone other than, a total peacenik who just wants to end this war at all costs, which, I admit I kind of do, it's very hard to justify not doing what the president did. And this stings especially because, according to the president, this Sunday, today, the Taliban and the president of Afghanistan, of the American-backed government in Afghanistan, who was Ashraf Ghani or Ghazni, forget his last name. They were, those two parties and Trump were supposed to meet at Camp David, and they were supposed to hammer out their differences and hopefully build a lasting peace. And this would have been a big historical event. Certainly, it could have quite possibly been the conference that ended the longest war in American history. But alas, it will now not happen. Now, back to that bombing in Afghanistan that killed 12 people. What exactly does that say about the Taliban that they would let that occur? It means, one, that they can't control their people, and that there are guys, even during a ceasefire, who just go out and are going to kill a bunch of people, no matter the consequences. That's one possibility, and I think that that's, a pretty strong possibility, considering that the Taliban is not, it's not a state, it's not a military, it's a ragtag band of Pashtun militias. These are guys who wander around the Asian steppe. They're not exactly the most organized folks, so it's quite possible that just some random Pashtun guy would decide to go out and carry out some attack. Now, it's a problem that the Taliban are taking credit for this, because that would seem to say that their leadership is either complicit or at least supportive of this action, which again it does not bode well for negotiations. Now, according to the president, the Taliban didn't see it that way. They thought that this bombing would give them some kind of leverage during the negotiations and would make them look tough going into the negotiations. And had the negotiations gone on, yes, they would have looked tough, but I would have to imagine that the Taliban couldn't have been dumb enough to think that Trump was just going to go forward with these negotiations after they went and did something so insulting like that. Now, with all that said, I don't think that all hope is lost necessarily. These negotiations have been going on for a long time, and I don't think that they'll die this easily. I think, though, that the president is by having not really, I don't know if you'd call it a strong response, but a strongly worded response to this Taliban attack, I think that he's giving the Taliban an opening to re-enter negotiations, but they will have to I guess you'd say, bend the knee or make some concessions, or at least show some humility. in order to get Trump back to the negotiating table. I think that at this point, in order for the peace talks to continue, what Trump is waiting for is he's waiting for the Taliban to make some gesture that demonstrates that they are willing to negotiate in good faith. Because, as the president said, if they aren't even able to maintain a ceasefire for this short period of a time, especially on the eve of very important negotiations in the United States, well, then what does that say as to their ability to maintain a ceasefire going forward? I mean, what good is signing a peace treaty if one side isn't going to follow it? The signing some big peace deal would be meaningless if the Taliban's going to keep fighting. So they need to show that they are hoping to stop fighting at some point, and that they will stay at peace with the rest of the country. Because, as much as I would like to, if I were in the president's shoes, just to say screw it, not even make a deal with the Taliban, just pull out entirely, get everyone out, because it's a waste of time and lives and resources. I look at that one American who died, and if I were in the president's shoes, I wouldn't blame the Taliban as much as myself for not getting him out of Afghanistan sooner, because really no one there has any reason to be there. The troops who die there really die for nothing. They all have. Because the war in Afghanistan has been a big waste of time, just like Vietnam. They didn't, the guys who died in Vietnam, I feel very bad for their families. I feel very bad for them. But they died for nothing. But the Taliban has to understand that if they really want the American troops out, that the American government has to save face, because they can't admit defeat here. They can't, just like, I don't even know if they officially admitted defeat in Vietnam, but eventually they did just get the hell out. I don't think that'll happen in Afghanistan, though, because Afghanistan doesn't hurt the United States enough. It's not a bad enough PR story. In fact, there's a lot of the media that thinks that Trump is, way too dovish on Afghanistan, and that it's dangerous that he wants to pull troops out. You can't pull troops out of anywhere. I mean, what are you, an anarchist? So in closing, I just have this one word of advice for the Taliban. If you really want the U.S. troops out of Afghanistan, help Trump help you. Just be good little adversaries and make a peace deal with him, and say, oh, okay, we're gonna go our separate ways now, and we're not enemies anymore, and we're gonna live peacefully forever, and then the American troops can leave, and you can go about your business. Doesn't that sound fun? Now, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.